Okay, how's this microphone? All right? Hear us okay? Great. It is now my pleasure to introduce the two state lawmakers who have kindly agreed to join us today for a conversation about education issues in the 85th legislative session. On my left is State Representative Dan Huberty, Republican of Houston, brand new chairman of the House Public Education Committee. First elected to his District 127 seat in 2010, Chairman Huberty also serves on the House Pensions Committee. Previously served for 5 years on the Humble ISD board, including a stint as its president. A native of Ohio, he has an undergraduate degree from Cleveland State University and an MBA from the University of Phoenix. On his left is State Senator Larry Taylor, Republican of Friendswood, in his second term as chair of the Senate Education Committee. He also sits on the Business and Commerce, Finance, and Higher Education committees. Chairman Taylor was elected to represent District 11 in 2012 after serving 5 terms in the Texas House. He is a native of Friendswood and a graduate of Baylor University. Please join me in welcoming Chairman Dan Huberty and Chairman Larry Taylor. Gentlemen, thanks for making time away from the Capitol. I know that time is going to get less and less available to you as the session goes on, so we're glad to get you here together. Ordinarily, when talking about public education, I would start with school finance, but Chairman Huberty, you made some news this week on school choice. Or maybe it wasn't actually news because you didn't say something that you haven't said before. Your position on this subject is widely known, but it caught the attention of a lot of people. So I thought we would skip the side dish and get right to the entree today and visit about school choice. Your remarks on Tuesday were characterized basically this way. Huberty says that any school choice legislation coming over from the Senate is dead. Is that an accurate representation of how you feel?
There's lots of school choice that we have in the state of Texas. And before we get there, I want to publicly make a plea or a comment. And I think this is a fair comment. You know, sometimes in politics, we have the ability to agree to disagree on policy issues. I want to be very clear on something. You know, I am a supporter of educating our children and doing what's best, and we're going to have policy differentials. I would really appreciate, for those that we don't have the agreement, let's keep it on a policy level. Let's leave the personal attacks out of it if we can.
Yep.
I don't believe I did that on Tuesday. I didn't attack anybody, nor would I. I've never attacked my friend Larry. We have policy disagreements. But more importantly, you know, they did block walking in the neighborhood, and they've exercised their First Amendment rights, which I think is great. I think it's wonderful. Here's what I would say. When I'm not at home, please stay away from my home. Don't place signs in my yard. Don't knock on the door and ask my wife to answer the door and talk to you. You know where I live. The people know where I live. I think I'm just asking for a respectful thing. If I'm not at home, stay away from my house. My family and my children are not subject to what I have to go through as the chairman of publication. They get to live with me and all the mistakes that I've made over my life. But leave my family out of it, please. That's all I would ask, please, if you don't mind doing
So if we talk policy rather than personal, Mr. Chairman,
Absolutely.
Is it correct to say that the legislation Chairman Taylor has introduced and is likely to come over from the Senate this session is, as far as you're concerned as chairman, dead on arrival?
I think the policy discussion that Chairman Taylor and I have had on this there's flaws with it, and that's why when we talked about this on Tuesday, I said, you know, when you don't allow for accountability within the system, we don't have any other tax dollars that we spend throughout the state of Texas that we don't have accountability. And on Tuesday, we had a hearing on talking about the crafting of legislation for this legislative session as to what that's going to look like in all levels. And we invited the people from the Texas Public Policy Foundation to talk about ESAs. We had them there. So for people to suggest that we're not being open-minded and going to listen to what people have to say is just not true. We had them there, and I asked a very specific question. I said, would you allow to have accountability to where the taxpayer's at and have tracking of where the system was at? And their answer was no. And then I asked the second question, well, if that's the case, would you allow the same thing in public schools? And they didn't answer. And I said, well, you can come back next week and give us the right answer. You can give us the answer that you want. You can think about the answer that you want to give. That position hasn't changed. Now, you know, because the fact that I have not supported vouchers, which I've been on record since I've been elected and when I was on the school board,
right?
That position hasn't changed. So to be able to have that discussion,
right.
And I did it publicly that night, I don't think is a fair representation. And so, fast forward, I've been supportive of charter schools. You know, last session we had a bill on the floor that did not pass. That was a homeschool charter or home rule school bill. that failed on the House floor. I was a joint author of it with Joe Desautels.
Yeah.
That was a good piece of legislation. We didn't get it through the House.
So you're for some choice, you are for choice in general, you may not be for this specific version of choice.
I've supported charter
Right.
schools. I've supported the ability for them. Mike Feinberg, I see him here. He was at our panel talking about the things
Right.
that they need. You're right, Mike? You know, we've had open dialogue. I've been to their
So
schools.
let's come in a second to what you're for. I want to just begin though with what you're against, since that was the news. Chairman Taylor, I feel like I'm going to play marriage counselor today. Is there anything you want to say to him? Look him in the eye.
It's okay, buddy.
It's too much for me to expect you guys to hug it out.
We
but
will
I do
later,
think
maybe.
Actually,
We will later.
Yeah. Chairman Taylor, you have heard his comments. You've heard what he said today. What do you want to say in response?
Well, Evan, first of all, we don't need to hug it out. Dan and I have been friends for a number of years.
Yeah.
Friends can have disagreements on certain issues. Absolutely. And Dan and I are in constant communication.
Right.
In fact, we're going to have dinner to go over whole educational agendas to try to figure out what we're going to work on.
And where you could agree.
Yeah, and as far as the school choice bill, we're still working on that bill. We're going to send the best bill we can out of the Senate. But this is a process.
Yep.
And then we'll work through it as best we can.
Would you tell this group and people on the live stream in short form what the bill does so people understand? It is often just said to be a voucher bill, but no explanation comes, and that's a facile way to describe what is a little bit more complex, even to those who oppose it.
Well, there's two parts to it.
Yeah.
There's a tax credit scholarship bill that's very similar to what we passed last session out of the Senate. And the tax credit scholarship is companies making contributions to educational service organizations. And it's deductible from their franchise tax.
Right.
And those educational service organizations would take scholarship applications from eligible applicants, which were below 200% of federal
And
poverty
who
level.
determines the eligibility? There's a test.
Well, they do, but it's income-based. So,
Income-based.
Yes, and so they make scholarships from the educational service.
And who
organizations that go to
determines
private
whether
schools.
somebody, when they say this is my income, is telling the truth? Who's going to do the actual means testing or income testing?
Yeah, I don't remember that right off the top of my head, but it's part of the process. It's an application, so I guess it can be verified like we do anything, like we do for college application. And I will say one thing about the public money. We do Texas tuition equalization grants in Texas.
Right.
And that allows students to go to private schools, private universities. And we don't have necessarily, they have to be accredited colleges like we're doing with the private schools and public school. They have to be accredited schools. So there's an example somewhere where we do something similar.
Right. So the scholarships is one piece, and then there's education savings accounts. Explain that.
And there's an ESA, Educational Savings Account, and that's a broader thing. And it's the primary goal of the ESA is special needs and low income. We have special needs. There are schools. In fact, I toured one in Arizona over the last summer that specialize for blind children. And they did such an incredible job, and for about a third of the money what public schools had been doing in their programs, that the public schools were actually sending kids to that institution because they were doing so much better job and getting so much better outcomes for those.
And again,
students.
this is based on income in part, right? So there would be some kind of means testing to get access to these dollars.
Yeah, at a certain income level, you'd get like 90% of what for special needs, you get 90% of what the average state M&O is. Or in special needs, it's going to be varied based on the amount of need they have. And those that are below 200% above federal poverty level, they would get 75% of the average M&O.
Yeah. You say that the schools that would be eligible to receive these students and receive these dollars are accredited. Who's doing the accreditation?
Well, they're private school accreditation organizations.
Are you concerned about, in any way, setting up this whole other apparatus?
Well, the thing about, people talk about the accountability of private schools. You have to realize that private schools have the ultimate in accountability. Parents can walk away. If you're in a neighborhood school that's not doing a good job and you don't have money,
Right.
You have very little that you can't apply accountability to that school system. That's your school.
Yep.
Whereas private school, if that parent becomes unhappy in that situation, they can leave.
They
and
pull
their
their kid
money
out.
goes with them.
Right. Chairman,
So
the
we talk about accountability. That's a pretty high level of accountability.
Well, the kind of accountability that Chairman Huberty is talking about, though, I don't think is limited to accreditation. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
What kind of accountability do you want to see?
Well, we've got the new accountability system that was put in place that Chairman Taylor and I are working on fixing some of the problems with that.
This is the A through F
A
rating
through F,
system.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
been working on that and actually turned it over to the local superintendents and many from Region 4
Yeah.
that involved in that process. And because there's many of them that say, yeah, you know, you're right, we need accountability systems. We're not thrilled with the actual naming of it, but you know, we're going to work and fix that. So you know, when you send tax dollars out for that, I think there's the perception that, you know, well, where did that go? How are those schools doing? And then you've got the concerns about, you know, making sure that it's going to an accredited school, and where's the check and balance associated with that? How do you do that?
Well, Chairman
And-
Taylor says there's a private school accreditation process, and that only schools that pass that accreditation process would be recipients of those students and those dollars. You're not okay with that?
I think that what what my position has always been, and I think there's many members that share that in the House, is that, you know, we've got to fund. You know, if you're going to go in that direction, you got to treat it the same way that you're doing on the public side of the equation, because we talk about it and say, and we've had the hearings and we've talked about it this past fall, and we've had it, you know, just as recently as Tuesday. And I fully expect when we roll out our education bill on Monday, the people are going to show up on Tuesday, and I invite you to come and have that open dialogue and talk about it. You know, we're not closed-minded. We want to have that, but you gotta look at it the same way. You can't tell me that the schools are failing and not give them the tools to be successful, and then on the other side of the equation, just say, well, go ahead and spend the money and you'll be okay. And you know, I'm sure the students will be educated.
Chairman Taylor, why not subject the schools on the receiving end of these kids and these dollars to the same accountability measures, A through F, end of course exams? Why not do the same for the private and parochial schools as we see in the public schools?
Well, first of all, they're private schools, and they operate differently, and they have different curriculums and things. But their students, we know, are performing well.
And how do we know it?
Well, look at their college performance. Look how many of them go to colleges and things. That record is pretty clear. That's
Can you
why-
all hear Chairman Taylor in the back? No? We be sure Chairman Taylor's microphone is up, and if not, let's change it out, please, and give him a hand.
Check.
Keep going. Better?
I guess I could talk like this.
Okay. We want to make this as unpleasant for you as possible.
of course.
Taylor.
Well, we're getting there.
After all, we are the failing media, so I want to be sure that we're okay.
Yeah, so it's rigged. This
Right,
is rigged.
it's rigged. It is rigged, indeed.
We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt today. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Let's see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah. So you say that based on college performance.
Absolutely, and just so you know, we are working on public schools. We're trying to make it better. The testing regime.
Right, but to come back, is there any other area, Chairman, of public life that you, as a good conservative, would advocate for allowing tax dollars to go to X without sufficient accountability for how those tax dollars are
We've
spent?
been doing it for years. I mean, you talk about from the federal level on down.
Yeah.
All the grants, the scholarships the federal government gives
Right.
to go to colleges, what we do in Texas with tuition equalization grants. This is not a new thing. And frankly, this has been going on in other states. We now have over 26 states that have some kind of private school choice.
Right.
So we're not exactly on the leading edge of this.
And do the
This
other,
has been going on for 20
systems
plus
in the other
years.
states, Chairman, have any kind of accountability system different from the one you're proposing?
I don't believe so. I don't know every state, but we could certainly find that. But the point is, this is not going to be, this is not a win or lose deal. This is something that can run parallel.
So it's both
for
end,
every-
not either or, both end.
Because let's think about it. The traditional public school has all the advantages. It has the facilities. It has all the activities. That's where, it's the center of the town. In most of these towns across Texas, that's where people want to be. So we're not talking about a massive migration by opening up some choice for a few people.
Yeah.
Because most people want to be in that system. Frankly, you really have to want something different to leave that. Because that is they have the incumbency advantage. That's where all their friends are. That's where the parents are.
Yeah.
And so we're just talking about a small number of kids. If you look at the experience in other states, it has not decimated their public school system. In fact, in the program we're talking about, on my deal, we talk about taking, we keep hearing the argument about taking money out of public schools. I put in there that if a child leaves, we're taking 75% of what the average state M&O already is. We're going to leave half of that with the public school that they left.
So in fact, this may
You'll
ultimately
actually have more
increase the
money.
amount of money for public ed with fewer students.
Exactly. You'll have more money
Right.
in that school for a period of time, for a
Right.
year or two. Because I hear about we're at the break points. And
Right.
You lose one kid, and we've already hired a teacher and that kind of. So this gives you a transition period. But frankly, it also gives you a amount of time. If you're the public school that does lose kids, you might want to ask the parents why they're taking their child out.
Right.
And you may want to improve your program so you don't lose any more kids.
Well, so that, Chairman Huberty, is the argument often made, which is this is a marketplace. We live in a society in which we like to have choice. We like to have a marketplace on a whole bunch of other things. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't this incentivize the public schools, if they're afraid of losing students to private and parochial schools, to perform better? That is the argument often made.
Well, what was interesting is last legislative session when the governor said, I want to have high-quality pre-K, and we crafted that piece of legislation.
Right.
And to incentivize, high-quality pre-K within the public school system, the provision of that bill allowed for private partnerships. Specifically put it in. It was my bill.
Yeah.
I know what it said. I know what it did. And we were highly criticized by groups that said, this is, godless and socialist, I believe is what they said. And the reality was it wasn't. And so, as we go forward, but there was an accountability measure in that bill to make sure that we provided high quality teachers within the classrooms, that there was a check and balance, that there was accreditation for those teachers, that we went through all the things that needed to be done and checking the box to make sure that it was out there. And I appreciate in the policy discussion with Chairman Taylor, I really believe that the accountability measure has to be there. And when we say we're going to allow them to have the ultimate accountability, that argument should resonate on the public education side as well. We've been fighting to reduce testing over the years. There's lots of people that are supportive of the bills that we worked on collaboratively, that we've worked on to reduce testing.
Yeah.
But the accountability measures are here to stay. And leadership on both chambers have said we need to have an accountability measure here in the state of Texas. And I think it needs to hold true as we go forward. If public taxpayer dollars are going in there, people expect where that's to be. And I think that if you look at really across the state, and I appreciate what the chairman said about the grant programs that are out there. When we talk about that, whether it's CHIP, Medicaid, any of the programs that we out there that we fund, therapy services, we require a check and balance. How are you spending taxpayer dollars?
Yep.
Because if we just, then under that premise, then why have a check and balance? Why have agencies? Why have that out there? So
let me ask you about the principle at work. Again, I'm Chairman Taylor. I'm going to distill what you said in the question to Chairman Huberty. Why should wealthier families in the state have options that poorer families do not? Poorer families may have their kids in failing schools. They have fewer options to get their kids out of a failing school. This is the argument I've heard Chairman Taylor made. It's the argument that the Lieutenant Governor has made many times to me. Why do you only want choice for families that can afford it? What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, his bill, if you read the bill, the wealthiest families aren't going to qualify for it.
But the wealthiest families already have choice without a bill. That's the point, I think, right?
They have the ability to be able to, that's right, to place their children in the private school system. That's absolutely right. And so what his bill does is does that. I don't know how much clearer that I could be on this particular topic, where I said we have to have an accountability measure that's out there. We're talking about this subset of group, and you invited us here to talk about public education. We have 5.3 million children in the system. We haven't done and dealt with the school finance system in 30 years. We're trying to do that without a court mandate to be able to fix that.
Right.
We have charter schools that are in need of facility funding. We have public education systems that we are failing our children here. I recognize that. Don't for one second think that I don't recognize that we have problems within the public education system. But are you aware that right now we fund at going into this budget, 37% of state dollars is what's being appropriated for funding education in the state of Texas. At one time it was 50%.
Yep.
So when I go home and represent my community, and I see some of my constituents here in District 127, we have the highest tax rate. We have a $1.17 M&O cost, and we have about a 38 cent INS because we're a fast growth school district. So when I have to go home and explain to them that, yes, do I think that there's opportunities out there for us to place money in programs that I think could be successful?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I started, when I got elected in 2011, the first thing I said is I'm going to fight for my community to figure out how to bring money home to reduce the cost so we can be competitive, so we can provide competitive salaries in the public education arena. My position has not changed in the last 8 years on that particular topic. And I think it's important to be able to have that policy discussion as we continue to move forward. And while people will criticize me on this, I understand that, and that's the job that I have.
Right.
But we're going to have policy discussions, and it's very early in the session. I said that on Tuesday. It's very early in the session. We're going to have policy discussions. And so let's have those discussions, but let's focus on the 5.3 million children. We have choice. We have charter schools. We have magnet schools. We have IB programs. We have virtual schools. You know, are you aware that the virtual school system, we prohibit kids from kindergarten through 2nd grade to be able to go to the virtual school network? Why do we do that? I don't know. Let's have that discussion. Let's talk about that. You know, so there's so many policy ideas that we have that are going to be out there. It's critical to us. But, you know, when we start funding less, and, you know, we hear about property taxes all the time, and property taxes are too high. They're right. Property taxes are too high. Why? Because the state of Texas is funding 37% when our responsibility, when we did this deal in 2006, is we said that we were going to properly fund the schools, and we haven't. We're taking all the enrollment growth. We're taking all the recapture dollars. And talk to me about Houston ISD that's got a huge problem, Alamo Heights, Spring Branch ISD, people that are willing to sit there and go fight. Those are the discussions, but we're letting this discussion about this, which, you know, when, you know, Senator Taylor, when you get the bill over to us, we're going to have, you know, we'll have a policy discussion on it, right?
Right. Senator Taylor, Chairman Huberty is right that this is all connected directly back to whether we're sufficiently supporting public education at the state level, and that is what you just heard Chairman Huberty say is the criticism. The reason that property taxes are so high, that locals have such a high burden on supporting education, is because the state is not sufficiently stepping up. Can you defend the state's current contribution to public education as sufficient?
I can give you an explanation of it.
Sure.
You still can't hear me, can you? Here's the deal. Of the general revenue that the state has, that we bring in from the state, half of that goes to public ed. Half. So people talk about making education the #1 priority. It is. It always has been. Now here's the problem. Health and Human Services, Medicaid, if you look at a clock, education was 12 to 6. Health and Human Services used to be from 6 to 8, and then it went to 6 to 9, and then it went to 6 to 10. So if you take education and Health and Human Services, we're all the way to 10 o'clock. That leaves those 2 hours to fund highways, prisons, law enforcement.
So you think the reason that we're not spending more on public education is because public education has been crowded out of the budget?
It's being squeezed out by entitlements to the Medicaid program.
So if more money were available, you'd spend it?
Listen, how many of your taxpayers want to pay more money? I hear from the same taxpayers, and they don't have more money to pay.
Right.
But I'm not. Hey, this is the system we're in. We didn't create it.
So this is not a philosophical difference that you don't think that public education deserves more money or is doing a good job with the money they have. You simply don't have it.
Where does it come from?
Right.
But let me not to be disagreeable, but
go ahead.
The fact that the fact is that the general appropriation in House Bill 1, and I don't know, obviously the Senate's going to pass their budget, we'll pass our budget. We have $43.9 billion allocated for the biennium, and there's a $215 billion budget. Let's just round it up in that.
But that's all funds. That includes federal money. Most of that goes to Medicaid.
Let me finish. So you understand how the House crafted their budget. Last session, we had $35.5 billion in general revenue money that came in out of GR. This year we put $35.5 billion in there. So we said we funded enrollment growth. We didn't. Then you look down below that line item and you got recapture money that comes in, and the recapture money is going up because of districts like Houston ISD, and you have the enrichment in the property tax growth. We've taken 100% of the property tax wealth that's come in with the increasing cost of property tax associated with it. So the difference between last year's budget and this year's budget is $1.48 billion. That's what we have in our general appropriations budget. And that is tied to the finance bill that we're going to roll out on Monday. If that doesn't happen, we would fund at the same level that we did in the 15 budget. That is not 50% of the budget. Now, if you add all of Article 3, which includes K-12 and higher education, you know, your approach, it's about 37, it's about 38%.
Well, you're talking all funds.
I'm talking all funds.
General revenue.
I'm talking all.
State raised money. General revenue.
Is the recapture, you alluded to HISD, is the recapture system in which property wealthy districts write a check to the state working? HISD voters obviously believe it is not. The mayor believes it is not. And they're refusing, at least as of now, to send what the recapture system would have had them send back to the state. You don't agree with that?
Well, first of all, I think Houston, what they did was wrong originally, because we have districts that have been in this game, playing this game for a long time, and participating in it. You have a problem in the structure of the system, where we're in downtown in beautiful Houston right now, And you have all these big buildings that are down here, and so they get the wealth associated with it. You go out to Crosby, Texas, they don't have that. They don't have that ability to do that. And by the way, Crosby, Texas is at the highest tax rate that they possibly can,
Yep.
and they're still dipping into their fund balance. So you have a problem with that. Houston got into a situation where their wealth went up because of the valuations that the appraisal districts have gone out of control, by the way. That's a whole different issue, but the appraisal districts are out of control. And then you've got enrollment growth that's dipping, right? And so there's this problem that happens, and nobody would ever thought they would have gone into a recapture mode when they put the system in place, but that's where they are. Now, they have the additional homestead exemption, which allows that 160 to be reduced, okay? But the problem is that you have to have the wealthy school districts participate in the whole basis because the other school districts couldn't afford it. First of all, we don't even give them the ability to go back to their voters if they wanted to. We have 327 school districts in the state of Texas that are at the $1.17 max. They couldn't even raise their taxes if they wanted to. And so we have to fix that problem. So the bill that we're going to talk about on Monday actually helps the recapture school districts. It helps charter school districts. It helps everybody within the public education system because we look at it and say we've got to do something to help these recapture school districts. Spring Branch is here, I think. Spring Branch is at a $1.09 tax rate, but they're a recapture school district. But they went to the voters and said we're going to participate in this. We understand how this works, but we're willing to do that.
Let me ask Chairman Taylor, do you think the recapture system is working? Do you support the decision of HISD to tell the state we're not sending you the check that we owe you?
I did not support HISD, what they did.
Yeah.
I think that was a mistake. I think when you started seeing what that really meant, when they were going to come in and take properties out of Houston and send them somewhere else, and that was permanent, I think that becomes very problematic.
The city I live in, the city of Austin, I think their check back to the state is 400. You know, the residents of Austin have temporarily put down their "He's not my president" signs to complain about recapture. You know.
You guys cover all the bases, don't you?
They'll go back to that actually after, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but you know, this is a problem not only in HISD, but it's a problem in a lot of the places in the state. So what do? Chairman Taylor, how do you blow up this system and fix it?
Well, that's
and
exactly
let me say
right.
also, if you could have fixed school finance, wouldn't you have already?
Well, first of all, I've only been chair of this for 2 years.
Right.
Okay.
But
so,
you've been in the legislature for a while.
Right.
You've seen the appetite for fixing school finance come and go.
Well, I'll tell you, the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
well, first of all, about recapture. It's not just recapture, it's the whole system. So you're right. I don't use the term blow it up, but we definitely need to start over from scratch. So, but the whole system needs to be fixed. And the fact is, the Supreme Court decision that a lot of schools did not like, and a lot of people were surprised by, I think they actually gave us an opportunity. What they said was, yes, it's constitutional, barely. But it's a mess. And we all agree it's a mess. But what that did, though, is that put it back to the legislature without giving us a prescriptive Supreme Court decision saying, you need to fix this right here.
So can you fix it in one session?
Probably not, but what we can do, and what I would like to see us do, is to work on a framework.
Right.
So here's what's happening so far. This system is so complicated. We have about a handful of people in the whole state of Texas who fully comprehend our school funding system. Ask the school district people that are here, they have to pay consultants to tell them how much money they're going to get from the state. That is ridiculous. Yeah. As legislators, I've been there now 14 years. Every time we had a bill having to do with school finance, they'd get up there and explain it as best they could. We would sit there and wait until they gave us what they called the runs. Don't take off of that. But it was a list.
Right.
It was a list of every school district in Texas.
Yeah.
And it showed how that bill would impact those districts. So every good legislator would get their highlighter and highlight the districts within their district.
Right.
And if it was positive, they'd vote aye. If it wasn't, they'd vote no. That is no way to do public policy.
Yeah, yes, but every legislator is going to represent his or her district, and every legislator is going to be focused on his or her piece. It's pretty unrealistic to think that a legislator who feels like they're not getting enough money is going to say, for the good of the state of Texas, I'm going to support it anyway.
But that's my point.
How do you change human nature?
So my point is, we try to build a structure that we agree this is a fair way to do it, and we agree to that, and then we spend the interim, and we figure out what the current weights and measures. You have to realize our most recent weights and measures are from 2003.
Yeah.
But we haven't updated cost of education indexes.
So you need better inputs. Better inputs.
Well, we need to update it.
Right.
English language learners today, we give 10% extra. Based on what? How much does it cost to effectively teach an English language learner? Let's find that
Chairman
out.
Huberty, you said to me on Tuesday you thought this was a multi-session fix.
Absolutely.
And
Let's
that
go
you
take
might
a
be able to
look
do
at
a portion of it this time, but
Yes.
that nobody should expect that the system is going to be fixed this time.
And that's right. And if you look at it, I went back and I've done the research. It's been 30 years since we've actually tried to take the legislature without the court suing us. We've had 8 lawsuits since 1968, 2 most recently in the last 3 or 4 years. And the reality of the situation is that the system that has taken so long to be broken needs to be fixed. You know, we think about this as a house. The first thing you pour is your foundation. When you have your home and you have a crack in the foundation, you know, you call the foundation guy, right? And you bring them in and you shore that up. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, and that's what I believe we're supposed to be doing. And as I said, when we roll out our bill on Monday, it's going to create an opportunity for Chairman Taylor and I to have a policy discussion as we move forward. We have some very good ideas. We've been working on this for the last 2 years to get to this point to where we're at. We're very excited about it because when people see it, they're going to understand we really tried to be thoughtful about making sure that we take care of everybody. Now, not everybody's going to be happy. We've got a big problem with acetar too. We've got a promise that we made back in 2006 to school districts that, hey, we're going to lower your taxes, but we're going to take care of you. And now we're saying it ends in 2017. We got 156 school districts with about $200 million. Some of these school districts are getting 50% funding from the acetar. They would go out of business.
Right.
Out of business if we don't deal with that situation.
But
So-
some of those
Let me,
also are
questioners,
getting
let me
more money
encourage you to
than
come down.
Understood.
We're going to go to you in a second if you have questions. Chairman, will you make the House taking up school choice a condition of the Senate taking up school finance?
That's above
There's
my
been
pay
some,
grade.
well, but you're the chairman.
I'm
How
just
much
the
how much
chairman.
more above their pay grade is there? You're the chairman.
Evan, I'm the chairman of the Senate Education Committee.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the best bill I can out of the Senate Education Committee and off the Senate floor.
Right.
And then I'll go work with my colleagues in the House.
You don't believe there should be any hostage taking?
I'm not a hostage taker. I don't have the ability to be a hostage taker. I believe in working
Right.
with members.
Very quickly, A through F is going to still be the law of Texas if we were sitting here a
It
year
is.
from now,
It is.
correct?
It is.
Is it working
It's gonna be
perfectly?
better. No, it's terrible.
No. And
Well, let
This
me,
was your bill,
Hey.
right?
I shouldn't say it's terrible.
how'd that bad bill pass?
I'm sorry, but the way it rolled out, frankly, I wish it hadn't been released to the public.
Yeah.
We needed to give it to the school district so we could get the impact and the input back to
Right.
give the constructive
Do
criticism.
you believe if you had only given the grades to the school districts and not the public that it wouldn't have gotten leaked?
Well, let me just tell you this. I think the biggest surprise for a lot of people is the post-secondary readiness.
Right.
And obviously there's something that's wrong.
10 most populous school districts in the state, the only one with a grade above C was Dallas
Yeah.
ISD.
So
right?
obviously their cut score on that was set too high. So these are the things that we can fix. But the fact is A through F is going to be transformative for public ed. And here's the big difference a lot of people aren't focusing on. In the past, we've had these accountability systems, and we kind of set it up, and then we kept moving the line. We kept moving the goal line. The fact is, in the A through F, an A is going to be an A. We're going to set the goalpost in the ground.
Right.
And then that's going to be it. So everybody complains it's a forced bell curve. It was not a forced bell curve. It's just that life is a bell curve. But once you put the goalpost in the ground and you set out the parameters, what it takes to get an A, and you quit moving it,
Right.
the bell curve will migrate towards the A's, and the people and the parents and the community will know where their school is, specifically what they need to improve upon.
Yes.
So they keep moving forward. We're going to have some schools that probably think they're A's, and they're going to be B's.
They're
and
going to
C's.
discover they're not. What's the problem quickly with the input slides?
Well, first of all, there was too many domains. I think that we should have been more collaborative in dealing with the superintendents and the school people to be involved in this process. You know, I was on a school board. We had exceptional recognized, that system, and then we went to you're either doing okay or you're not doing okay. That's not an
terrible
accountability system.
It's terrible.
And so we have the system, and there's differing views on this, but the one thing that I think anybody that knows how we've been working on this bill, and we've been working with Chairman Taylor's office as well, we've been very inclusive. Anybody that wants to have inputs, but we specifically at this point been working with Commissioner Morath, but turned it over to the superintendents, people like H.D. Chambers, and said, okay, let's have a system, and they all bought into it at where we're at today and saying, you're right, we're going to put more inputs, extracurricular activities, making sure we understand what the ESL students have the ability to do.
Poverty.
Absolutely. Taking into consideration how long do you have that student, and measuring those kind of things, looking at it from a holistic perspective. The test is not the only thing that should determine how
Right.
successful a school is going to be.
So we're looking at mended. we're looking at mend it, not end it.
Absolutely.
As far as
Absolutely. Absolutely.
HRF goes.
Well, can
Sir,
I say one thing real quick?
Yes.
About, one of the main things we want to make sure we don't just measure is economic levels of community. And that's one of the things we've
Right.
heard.
Although that should be one factor, and it's not weighted right now as one of the
Well,
domains,
it is,
right?
though. Because a school system, no matter where your students start, should be growing those students, right? And they should be, frankly, growing at least a year for a year's worth of education. So one of the measures in there that people aren't focused on either, it's not just passing the test, it's also measuring growth.
Well,
So-
that is one of the current
and
domains.
you
right?
can
Yeah.
use one or the other. So every school district will have the chance to get an A either in the growth or in achievement.
achievement.
So that's a good way to kind of equalize that out. So some people complain, well, it's so complicated. Well, the reason it's complicated is because we don't want to do it just on a test. We're trying to take in other accounts and measures to put into that system. So it makes it a little bit more complex, but at the end of the day, it needs to be simple enough that a parent can understand
An average person
and
can
a
understand
community
it.
can understand
Sir.
it.
Hi, I'm David Branham. I'm an associate professor of political science here at University of Houston downtown. I have a long experience in education research. A couple of things that I am very concerned about.
One question, please.
Yes.
Please.
A couple of things I'm very concerned about with vouchers. There's two problems. One, we have a lot of people come out of the woodwork that all of a sudden say they're educators when you introduce it to the market. Two, most of these people are not invested as far as infrastructure goes. Infrastructure is very important in education. And the problem, I see problems there. Are we willing to invest money in their infrastructure or force them to have some infrastructure that will allow them to properly educate children in the process of doing this?
Chairman Taylor, what about that?
Well, I've heard this for many years. I would rather have a good teacher under a shade tree than a bad teacher in a very nice classroom, because that's where education happens. So infrastructure is up to the schools. We have charters that are meeting in old grocery stores, office buildings, and they're taking kids that were in schools that were having 30% dropout rates, and they're having kids, 95% of them go to college.
So
and
there's not a
99%.
facilities funding component to this
Well-
or a facilities standard?
Well, that's part of having, if you have a school choice option, a public school choice option, some of those will have more funds that they can use to build facilities that they don't have available today. But these private schools, a lot of them are already there and they have capacity in some cases already. But I think you'll find, if once you start having this, that you'll have some people that specialize in some special needs. We have a growing number of autistic children in our state. You may find some people that specialize in that, whereas one school may have a few kids with certain special needs. If somebody specializes in that area, you may have like a magnet program that's a private program. The thing is, we don't have the phone we have today. If we wouldn't have this if we were in a monopolistic system. Think about it. Remember AT&T or whoever your carrier was? And then when they first came out with a cell phone, it was a bag phone. Do you remember that? Had a little shoulder strap, you had a car battery, you had about 25-minute talk time. If we were in a monopolistic system, we wouldn't have moved much beyond that, because why would you need more than that? But the idea that competition came to the marketplace, this is why we enjoy what we have today. So I don't know where it's going to take us from here, but we need to make sure we have controls. But for private schools, the ultimate accountability is the consumer can say, this isn't work for my child, we're going to look at something else.
Sir.
Yes, I'm Melvin Ehlert. I'm a board member in Brenham ISD.
Yes.
A quick comment, the budget crisis that you gentlemen are facing now really has nothing to do with low oil prices, because oil prices were lower in 2015 than they are today. The problem is the $5+ billion in tax cuts that you gentlemen handed out.
Well, it was actually, let me slightly fact check you, it was less than $4 billion.
My question is presently 66% of public ed students in Texas are African American, Hispanic, or biracial. My question is if 66% of public ed students in Texas today were white, would we even be talking about school choice?
Chairman Huberty, let me let Chairman Huberty take that.
Thank you for being here in the service on your board. I've been The bill that we're rolling out on Monday is trying to, it has more money in public education on the House side of the budget than the Senate does, because we recognize that. And if you recall, and I was a board member, and I understand exactly what you're going through and the cuts and the things that we had to do. And the unfunded mandates. First bill I ever passed in the Texas House of Representatives to repeal an unfunded mandate on school districts. And so I'm very optimistic and cautious about that. I will say to you is that I recognize very clearly, and I said it again, we are funding at this level right now 37%. We are providing 37% of the dollars to the public education system. That is not enough. Meaning what we were supposed to pay.
But do you believe it's about race or demography? That's really the question.
I don't. I think that we have a system that we have the changing demographics of the state of Texas, and that my kids all go to public schools. Contrary to what all the posts said this week, and where my kids go to school, I don't. And yeah, they all are entitled and private school kids. Farthest thing from the truth. I've got 3 kids that go to a very diversified high school, and I think they're very well rounded by being able to do that. I've got a special needs child. I know T-Case is here. I've advocated on behalf of, at one time I was the only member of both Public Education Committee, either in the House or Senate, that actually had kids in the public school system. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. What I'm saying is that the House is going to roll out a budget that is going to provide additional funding into the education system to meet our obligations. That is our responsibility to be able to do that.
Evan, real
Yes,
quick.
sir.
First of all, the school choice discussion has been going on for 20 years. And other states have it. And frankly, I think you're misunderstanding the people that are benefiting from it. If you look at the other states, it is a very high percentage of the people that are participating are minorities. And they're leaving schools that they've been trapped in.
So let me ask you a question. If legislators who represent urban school districts are themselves representing people who would benefit from this, why are so many legislators in urban school districts not for this?
It's one of the things I cannot explain. I think it has something to do with teachers' unions or something, but it doesn't make sense.
Come on, please.
The people who benefit from these programs, if you look at other states' experience, are high percentages of minority students. And they are getting a much better opportunity than they were having before. And that's why the
Quickly,
parents
one
are-
last quick question here. Yes.
A couple of comments. First of all,
One quick question is all we have time for. I'm sorry.
okay. When y'all are having this meeting on the legislation next week,
Yes.
will you be taking into account the percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged that are being served by a school district?
Yes.
Where HISD has 80% of economically challenged children.
Yes, absolutely. In the process that we rolled out, and I'm not trying to be evasive because the bill, we're tweaking some things over the weekend. We took into consideration the urban school districts. As I said, there's things that are going into this. For those of you who don't understand, school finance is a very complex thing, and I actually do understand it. I've spent my entire last 20 years trying to understand how this works. There's people like Commissioner Scott and that are sitting in the room that have been involved in this for many, many years. But what we want to do is we want to rise the ship. And when you do that and you put money back into the basic allotment, we have things that are sitting outside the formula right now that don't belong to be doing that. And we need to put them back inside the formula. And that's going to bring that up. It's going to help school districts like yourself. And we also recognize, whether you know this or not, we passed a bill in 2013 that recognized that there's now 150,000 identified dyslexic students in the state of Texas. When we used to say, oh, that kid just doesn't pay attention or he doesn't know. You know why I know? Why I passed that bill? Because my kid's one of them. Because my kid fights every day for his life in public schools to prove that he's worth being there with the rest of those children. And we're going to do something to help kids like that in this state. That's what we're going to do.
Can I also
Agnes,
just
I'm going to
say
take
that
one more.
vouchers,
I'm going to take one more quickly.
sorry.
And then we're
vouchers
going
in other school systems have not shown to be effective, that those students are doing no better on standardized tests. And if you want to give money, tax money to schools that are not having to pass this, where their children are not having to pass the STAR exam, that is not where I want my tax money going.
Okay, thank you very much. This has to be very, very quick question, very last answer, and then we're going to have to move on to the next panel. Ma'am, please.
I hear a whole lot of talk about school choice. I live in a neighborhood where we're the kids that are left behind because we don't have the choice. Why are we not trying to fix schools everywhere instead of giving children an opportunity to go across town? Because kids like my child Because I don't want to have to bus him 20, 30 minutes away. I want to be able to walk him to school.
Great.
Why are we not worth the funding? Why are we not worth it?
Well,
And Chairman, address the fact that some areas of the
said that,
state don't have private or parochial schools as options, right?
We don't. And you said that minorities are taking advantage of the school choices because, a lot of times, no one is putting the resources into our schools. But some of us who are going to fight and who are going to fight for our children are not going to do that. So we deserve funding. We deserve accountability. We deserve good
Got it.
teachers.
And I'm with you, and I understand.
Last
And
answer.
here's the deal: we have been working to improve this. You understand? We sped up the timeline for the state to get more directly involved. It used to take 6 or 7 years, sometimes longer, before the state would get involved with a failing school. We've shortened that down to like 3 years. In fact, the first year that they do poorly, they have to come up with a plan. It has to be approved by the commissioner. If that doesn't work, or they don't get approved, we bring in a board of managers. We get directly involved. There's a number of things we're trying to do to improve all public schools. Most of the work we do, that we kind of gotten caught up in the school choice. We're working on a plethora of things to improve public education in Texas. Frankly, to move Texas education into the 21st century.
But can you make a case to a parent like that one, or to a parent in a rural school district somewhere else in the state who says there is no school choice in my community?
There are charter schools.
Why should I support this?
That is a charter.
Let's
Excuse
let him
me.
answer, please. Let's let him answer. Let's let him answer, please.
Excuse me. A charter school is a public
Let's
school.
let him answer, please.
Okay.
Can we let's let him answer, please.
A charter school is a public school, but we are working on multiple. They are more accountable.
All right.
They
are more accountable.
Let me just add one.
This is going to be the last word
Well,
from
can I say something about?
Chairman, go ahead.
We do have a shortage. There's a waiting list right now for charter schools of over 100,000 kids because they don't have any type of facility funding that we talked about earlier. We need to give more children that opportunity. And frankly, some of the schools are actually the traditional public schools are working with the charter schools and bring them on campus to provide more opportunities within your neighborhood. So we are working on it. I don't know where you live, but we're working on it.
Last word, Chairman Huberty, and a quick one, please. Last word. Go ahead.
Thank you for being here, and I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, and that's why we're working to put the money back to where it belongs in the formulas so that we can rise the tide, so we can properly make sure that you have the resources to do your job. We throw unfunded mandates and all kinds of criticisms at the public schools that we don't give them the tools. So we have to be able to give them the tools to be successful. And as we proceed through this legislative session, we are going to try to do that. This is going to be a very difficult session. Again, first time in 30 years that we